What's up, guys? Today we're going to look at another round of revision for our poems. You got the basics together and we put a title on it and we called that a first draft. But now we're going to look at a second draft, which is one step, one thing that's really important, and I want to focus on it. It's the most important thing for any type of writing, but especially for poetry. The verbs are what matters. Okay, we want to get the verbs to really carry their weight and do their job, which is the biggest job of any part of speech. Right here I have an example. I looked out the window, which is what I always do when I need an idea, and I wrote some lines. And we've got the tree on the hill. This tree, we see these out here every day and they're green, but recently they've changed to yellow, to orange, and some even to red. And it looks really different right next to the green grass. The grass is still green, but when the grass and the tree were the same color, it didn't really catch your eye. Now that they're different, it does. So that's interesting. And then off to the side is one other tree. It's just a bunch of branches. It has no leaves at all. How did that happen? Did I not notice that it was always like that? Did the leaves fall off way ahead of all the other ones? I don't know, but it's interesting. So I wrote a couple lines, but I made sure to make the verbs extra boring, and we're going to work on improving them. So if you look in these, we got is, we got goes, we got is, we got has, and those are like basically invisible. You don't notice them at all, and that means they're not doing anything. So we want to make it so they do stuff. And how can we work on that? Well, the first thing, the simplest thing, and it's totally fine, if you have a line where you don't like the verb, you could just cut it. Okay, the tree is on the hill. We could just say the tree on the hill, and that doesn't lose any meaning at all, right? It loses the grammatical status of like, well, it's not a sentence anymore, but it doesn't matter. And the meaning is exactly the same. When you put the is in there, we don't get any new information, right? We already knew the tree was on the hill. So that's one thing, and that's totally fine. If you have a line with no verb, that's better than a line with a bad verb, okay? This one right here, there's no verb, and it's okay. We might not add one. Another thing you can do is replace a verb. Just switch it out, keep everything else, and you're still moving in the right direction. So for that one, I think this line would work. We've got one tree off to the side, has no leaves at all. I'm going to say the has, we could switch that out for something. And my first guess always is, how about some alliteration? It's just nice, right? That's one of the things that poems do that other types of writing usually don't do, unless it's just accidental. I could say lacks, and then I don't need to know. I could say lacks leaves, and that's not really adding anything new. The meaning is the same, but at least it sounds nice. And you can say lacks leaves, and it's got a nice alliteration to it. And even the other sounds, like when I'm looking at the trees and they're dry, dead leaves, it kind of needs to feel dry and crunchy and crisp. And has doesn't. Has is a very round, warm sound, where lacks, the k, has got a nice dry crunch to it. So that's something. Even though we didn't add a metaphor, we didn't add personification, we didn't add anything to the meaning, it still sounds better, and that's cool. Also, it's just a little bit surprising. If you're reading a sentence and everything fits with what you thought it probably was going to be, that's boring. But if you see a word you weren't expecting and you go, nice, okay. And so lacks, it's not that fancy, but it's a tiny bit more surprising than seeing has again, you know. But another thing, let's say we don't want to just cut, we don't want to just replace. Sometimes you will rearrange or combine or do another sort of, if you're talking about computer programming, you'd say refactor, like do the same job but in other words. So I'm looking at these first two lines and I'm thinking that they don't really need to be two. We can combine them into one because they're not doing that much. They're saying, okay, there's a tree and it's changing color. And I think what I want to do is knock out all of this, take out all of this, and I'm going to put one verb instead. Okay? And I'm going to go for the alliteration again. I'm going to say turns. The tree turns green to orange. So we get alliteration of the T's. And we also get some consonants with the RN, the RN, the RN. Sounds nice. And when I say consonants, I mean with a CE, not necessarily with a TS. The CE means you've got a couple words in a row that have the same consonant sounds, but not at the beginning the way alliteration is. So the only thing we lost the word color, but that doesn't matter. When you say green and orange, we know we're talking about color. You don't have to say it. But we did lose the hill. It was talking about the hill. So let's say we want to keep that. We don't want to lose that. Let's put it in the title. We didn't have a title. Now we do. Okay, we can always change this later, but at least we lost nothing. But we made this line a lot more concentrated and distilled, and this one line is now saying exactly the same as the previous two did, but it sounds better. It gets to the point. It has a lot of more qualities that make it, poetic. I hate to say that, sound vague, but it's got the sound. It's got the directness to it. Again, we didn't add any interesting metaphor, so we might get to that in a minute. But let's take a quick overview to see if there's anything else we can change on that extremely easy level. Okay, right here, we got another is, and I think I want to replace the is, and I think I want to do the same thing, just throw in some alliteration, because why not? That's like your absolute basic. That's like seasoning food. You put salt, okay? You might put lots of other stuff, but in pretty much any type of dish, you're going to have some salt, and it's like alliteration, yeah, we need it. In English, it's just one of the main things. In Old English, it was the number one poetic device, and now rhyme is kind of taken over a bit, but we're still there, all right? So I'm going to go with a really obvious one. When you say grass and green, the other word that comes to mind, and it's probably coming to your mind, is grow, right? The grass grows green. That sounds nice. I kind of like it. I'm going to cut this because it's boring. And I'm thinking about moving the still because I want to put these three words next to each other, and the grammar of it kind of lets the still go anywhere. You can put that at the beginning or the end. We could say, still the grass grows green. Although it would be kind of nice at the end because the double L is a minimal rhyme with, you got the double L and the double L. It's not a full rhyme, but it's something. And you got the in sound and the in sound. It's not a full rhyme, but it's something. If you remember a few weeks ago, we read a poem called Traveling Through the Dark. And that poem did a lot of mild rhymes. You almost don't even notice they're there, but subconsciously they make you feel like it's connected, like there's a plan. It's not just saying what it needs to say to describe what happened, but it's saying it in a way that's just dressed up a little bit. It's like maybe you have a little bit of blue in your shirt and you have a little bit of blue in your socks, and they're not the same, they don't match, but they just highlight each other and bring out that magic a little bit. Okay, so these rhymes like the in, L, I kind of like having them. And then maybe we could do like a real full, nice, perfect rhyme at the end if we want to bring it all together and put a cherry on top. We'll see. Now, currently, this is all literal. This is all just saying what happened. And that's fine. But usually you want your verbs to include a little bit of life beyond that. Because in a poem, you don't have to just say what happened. You want to say what it feels like, or what it compares to, or how it might drift from one thing to the next in a dream-free associative way. Okay? So one thing I was talking about with my previous class who was in here is I was saying the tree changing where it gets orange and then red and then gone, all the leaves are gone, that's kind of like a really slow motion fire. Okay, if you set the tree on fire, all the leaves would turn red and then they would be gone, and then you would look at the tree and it's just trunk and branches, dark color, no life, which is what happens, right? It's interesting because it's the opposite of what's actually happening, which is that in winter it gets colder, whereas in our version it gets hotter. So that's kind of cool. And I do like that metaphor. We don't have to lean into it the whole time, but it's just something that's nice. You know, it's better than just saying like, hey, it turned color and then a thing happened. So how can we do that? I want to do it in the verbs because the verbs can like carry that. They don't have to add a whole new line to say what you're doing. They don't have to like set it up. You can just say like, if I wanted to say the tree heats, the tree blazes, the tree, one thing that stands out is pretty obvious is that on this guy we could change one letter and say the tree burns. I think that's pretty cool. We lost the alliteration with the T, but I think it might be fun. And then somewhere around here we could add in another, every once in a while, add in another flame-related verb. And I think that would be kind of cool. You don't have to, but I do want to stress that poems are not just saying what happened, okay? Poems are all about what is it like, how does it come alive with new angles. If you remember, one example I used from The Raven, when we read The Raven, there's a part where at the end, our narrator is kind of losing his mind, as all Poe narrators do, and he's watching the raven, and the raven is just sitting there. Like throughout the whole poem, the raven hardly does anything, right? It just sits there and says 2 words, I think. But as a writer, you want to make it active and interesting and threatening and in your face. So there's a part where it says, the raven, his shadow is on the floor, and our narrator is like menaced by the shadow. The shadow is like coming after him. It's like if you think of the Nosferatu claw on the staircase, you know. But it's not actually doing that. The raven is just sitting there, and the shadow is just sitting there, maybe flickering in the candlelight. But Poe says, the lamplight throws a shadow on the floor. Throws is just such a nice verb because A, it's unexpected. It's give us a little surprise, like, oh, I didn't expect that. 2, it describes what it looks like. Okay, like literally the shadow is horizontal. It's like really stretching out across the floor, and throws kind of implies that it's been flung over. So that's nice. It helps us picture a literal thing, but it also helps us feel a non-literal thing, which is like, oh, it feels like the shadow is coming after us. It feels like it's been aggressively thrown at us. It's not, right? Like the flame does not have an idea and an intention, but in a poem it does. Okay, in a poem everything is alive, everything has a spirit and a desire and a menace sometimes. And finally, it's just like it feels like something's happening. It's active when the scene is really not active. The raven's just sitting there, the shadow's just sitting there, the narrator's just sitting there, and he's going crazy in his mind. But if we saw this on a camera, it wouldn't be moving. So you want it to feel like it's moving, and so throws is nice. It really feels like stuff is happening, you know. So you want that, you know, you could say that's personification, I guess, like the lamp has a bit of human agency there to throw it out. Or you could just say it's a nice figurative way to describe that image. But you want to look for stuff like that. So like in here, Reminding, even though that is a verb that is a little uncommon and it's a little interesting, and I didn't mention it when I was cutting out the really bland ones, I don't love reminding because I want it to be something more with more personality. So I might go back in another round and try to figure out what could I do of reminding that's like more dreamy, more figurative. For example, we'll go with the fire metaphor. What does fire do? I could say like alarming. Right away that's like, ooh, interesting, alarming. I don't know about that. Or I could say like heating or sweating or I don't know what, but we could get into that and it becomes a lot more fun, I think.